Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about the Oden Haven't Explained series, going down on the damage, the recoil, the fire rate, different builds to get you the Oden to enjoy in the Warzone. The Oden is a gun with many problems. We're going to pit it here against the Kilo to emphasize these problems. So first and foremost, the fire rate is abysmal. It has a 413 RPM. That's roughly half of what the Kilo or the M4 has, for example. That means for every one bullet of the Oden, you have 2 bullets of Kilo or of M4, for example, which is still good for the Oden because, as you can see, the Oden does 62 damage on a chest shot or 77 on a headshot. That's quite insane. 48 on its tummy. 48 on a tummy is obviously not that impressive anymore because if we think about, okay, you have half the fire rate of the Kilo shoots 2 bullets when you shoot 1 bullet, so you're going to have actually more damage with the Kilo if you shoot someone in the penis. Whereas if you shoot someone in the chest or in the hand, which is really good with the Oden because of the high vertical bounds, you can shoot chest, head, chest, head. It's kind of like what the gun does for you. When it comes down to bullet velocity, the bullet velocity is actually decent. So we have the 720 meters per second, and on top of that, the Oden has quite some attachments to increase the bullet velocity. But the biggest manco and downside is the freaking ADS speed. That's 346 base versus, for example, on a Kilo 238. Let's look at that in the time to kill chart. So from a technical time to kill comparison, the Oden is an absolute destroyer. I mean, it has a really nice low time to kill. It has an insane range up to 42 meters base before the first fall off happens, and that's without attachments. And when we're talking about, you have a colossal suppressor and you have a longest barrel that add roughly together another 50-60% range. So you have your first damage fall off back here. That's really nutty on the Oden. Obviously, here comes a big difference now. If we start already adding ADS time percentage to the gun, oh, what a wonder. The Kilo suddenly is technically better in the short ranges. And if we now add attachments, that gets only worse for the Oden. Regardless of these things, we figured out a couple of builds for you that are fantastic with the Oden. Let's check the base recoil, see how to counter that, and then surprise you what madness we have for you. Standard Oden, 30 round mag to emphasize the stark vertical recoil of the gun. Let's go. And as you can see, that gun is pretty much only vertical recoil, nothing else. But there's a really interesting part about the Oden, and that is there's like nothing horizontal going on with the gun. I mean, we start here, bounce a little bit to the right, so that's what you have to know about the Oden. You're always going to bounce to the right, and then you flick to the left, but that's your curve. Like, no bullet of the Oden deviates from the path. The Oden just is only vertical recoil, which obviously means if you now put on recoil control attachments that squash your recoil together, hell no. That's going to be a fantastic thing to do. What are we going to do against that base recoil now? Let's look at the muzzle attachments first. We have a high variety, but one thing comes out, and that's the Colossus Suppressor. The Colossus Suppressor is one hell of an attachment. It does 45% range modifier, 11% vert recoil reduction, and also plus 30% bullet velocity. It also adds plus 54 milliseconds ADS time, and already said the ADS time is abysmal on the gun. But technically, we're talking about going for crazy recoil control, plus obviously then even more beaming factors. Yes, the Colossal Suppressor seems to be the attachment. The compensator does minus 27%, which is fantastic. But if you compare it now to the Colossal Suppressor, yes, 4 times less the ADS time with 3 times almost the vertical recoil reduction. But like, getting plus 40% bullet velocity plus is crazy. We're going to start though, now for the sake of maximum recoil control, with the compensator. Next up, the barrels. You have the longest, the shortest. The shortest mostly not used, then you just use no barrel at all. The long barrel, the 810, does a 52% bullet velocity plus. As I said, this gun just can go for immense ranges. Like, you can add 60% more range. Like, your 42 meter standard damage fall off will add 60% to that. And you have 26% recoil control, but also plus 46 ADS frames, which is 3 times as much as the Oden factory barrel again. So there is a way to build this slower ADS, but right now we're going for max recoil, and then we're going to compare that to medium recoil. We're talking about underbarrels. Technically, a bipod and prone would be the maximum recoil control, but that's not feasible. That's not realistic. You're never going to prone in bipod. So we didn't see a lot of visual recoil. That means the commando foregrip and recoil stabilization is not needed, but the Ranger foregrip might be here together with the aiming stability to make the Oden even go straighter in a path. Then as an optic for even more recoil control, we're adding the VLK optic, and last but not least, we're going to put a 30 round mag on again. Technically, you could actually think about playing a rubberized grip tape, because rubberized grip tape is 4% recoil control, but on a gun that has only recoil, like legitimately only recoil pulling you up vertical, still 4% is nothing. So this build would maximum recoil for the sake of testing it. Obviously, we didn't look at ADS times, we didn't look at anything. That's just to see how does the gun, like how low can we bring it, and how can we then mitigate ADS times and other things. Full recoil control Oden. Looking for the bottom point here, going left over, and welcome to the jungle, ladies and gentlemen. What do we see here? Funny story, due to the stark squashioning. So we pretty much, with all the attachments now, half the recoil. As I said, a lot of vertical recoil gets a lot of recoil control. But due to recoil controlling it, funny story, after the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 shots, start seeing also some horizontal deviation coming together because we squash it so much, obviously, that the gun starts on this, go a little bit left, right, left, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, left, right. So it might be a consideration to actually put the Ranger foregrip off to then peek out a little bit more, like you're losing in comparison Ranger to Commando foregrip 11% recoil control. So like we get like a bit higher, but we would squash everything a bit further together. So we would turn this from into a line again like this, with a little bit higher only. So that could be the Commando foregrip here. Obviously now with the compensator, we're losing a lot of bullet velocity, which is kind of the selling point of the Oden, that with the bonus bullet velocity of the 2 longest barrel, you kind of out bullet velocity everything. And if we're looking at the gun, the one problem, you jump around a corner, you see an opponent, he sees you, The trick with the Oden is you kind of do this, if that makes sense. It's kind of like the shitty part of the Oden. So you see someone coming, oh yeah, just start shooting, and then you ADS in. Because the ADS time is so abysmal that you kind of want to start doing that already. How do we improve from here on out from the full recoil control version? Step number 1, with the extreme recoil control with squashing everything together, the Commando foregrip might be better because it kind of makes sure that the gun stays aligned and doesn't start spreading out to the left and the right because it's getting squashed so much. Also on top of that, we have better ADS frames, which are the abyss of this gun, obviously. Then on top of that, we could slap off the mag, better ADS frames too, put on the tag laser, even better ADS frames, and now we would swap the compensator over to a colossal suppressor. That would then be maximum range, still recoil control, because the colossal suppressor gives you 11% recoil control. We'd lose some ADS frames, but we gained here, here, and here. So this would kind of be the hybrid build to see how well does this compare straight up to the compensator build. Let's call this the hybrid. We talked about it, what the attachments do. We have a faster ADS time now. You can already feel it. It's there. Not tremendous, still slow, but there. Biggest problem, obviously, the 20 round mag, but let's see how the 20 round mag now behaves in comparison to this. We have recoil stabilization in. We have an absolute straight line, and we're not that much worse off here. Like, as you can see, that was the 30 bullets. Obviously, this same spray, this is 20 bullets, and this is 30 bullets. So that needs to be kept in mind here. Still, though, despite that being 30 and that being 20, this is in line. As we said, if we put a little bit of recoil stabilization on the recoil control, then we are going back from having this beautiful long boy squashed together and have a line again. So your biggest downside is obviously 20 bullets. You shoot some, you reload. Reload speed, fairly long for an AR in comparison, for example, to the AK sleight of hand build. Still though, considering that you do on an upper body shot 66 damage, you don't need that many bullets to kill someone if you then do hit every single bullet. Because if you're tracking someone with this fire rate, it's kind of like you're tracking and you're really far pulled out. When you're doing this with a Kilo or an M4, for example, the M4 is kind of like, that's the M4 on one spot. So it's obviously like tracking with the M4 and so on is really easier. With a low fire rate rifle, it gets way harder to track people. But it's easier to be precise because every shot counts. So you like shoot, and then until the next shot, you even have time to adjust to the movement of the other person. Whereas with the high fire rate, it's sometimes like feelingly. Now, this hybrid equipped Oden that you saw there has a higher range than the base Oden. So the base Oden goes to 42 meters, and this one has a spray that could go up to 83 meters. But realistically, with the low fire rate of the Oden, spraying people and tracking people on that range is quite abysmal. It does work, but the Oden kind of brilliates in ranges up to, let's say, 50 to 60 meters, where like the super high damage with the precision just allows you to clap everyone's booty. Which means now we could experiment with actually using lower barrels, for example, which give us a way better ADS time. Because if we're looking at the stats here right now, we have 449 milliseconds ADS. Compare that to the base Kilo, we're 50 milliseconds slower. I mean, already this Oden build is a bit faster than the full recoil control build because we sacrificed the magazine for the tac laser. If we would now put the tac laser off and the magazine on, we would end up over 500 milliseconds aiming down side speed. So that's not an option. This is already the optimized ADS time version, but can we squeeze out more to have a better ADS time than the Kilo? Okay, the hybrid build was fun, but I kind of feel like we can go from here and out and improve that even more. So we're going to slap off the Colossal Suppressor again and put on the Compensator. That makes the gun an even faster ADS time. So we're aiming for, we want to beat the Kilo ADS wise. And we would also lower the barrel from 810 to 730, which loses us half the recoil control and some bullet velocity, but we still have a 50 meter range until the first damage fall off happens, over 50 meter actually, and that's where the sweet spot for the Oden is. The thing, I want to fight everything from 10 to 50 meter with this, and inside of buildings, I want to use my MP5. Basically, this version can also still be played with the Colossal Suppressor. We're going to go down on that in the recoil study right now. But technically, when we're talking about best ADS times, that's the vibe here. I'm really excited to spray this bad boy into a wall and see how that compares to the other two versions. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what do you have to offer? A way faster ADS time. It's probably the fastest ADS time Oden I've ever built. Could probably even squeeze a little bit more out of that, realistically. And if we're looking at the recoil pattern, it's actually the shortest of them all yet on 20 bullets, obviously. I mean, this is 30 bullets again. This is 20 bullets. This is shorter than the 20 bullets because you have the compensator on now, but it's not that much more. The thing is, with the compensator, we're losing 4 times the ADS time of the Colossal Suppressor. As good as the Colossal Suppressor is, but the difference between comp and Colossal is this. So it's not that big, but we're talking about 50 milliseconds ADS time now due to not using the longest barrel and due to not using the Colossal. And that's kind of like a sales argument because at this point, you're almost 100 milliseconds faster ADS than a Kilo. And, well, you shoot twice as slow, but you do 3 times as much damage, more or less, on an upper body shot. So if we're just going with the Oden now, and we're going to be like, oh yeah, as we said, we're not going to shoot on 100 meters. We're going to shoot like on this 50 meter distance with this recoil pattern. And you would be like, oh yeah, you're walking there? You're walking there? No problem. We started here. I flicked over because I'm a bot, but then you're just like, you're on spot. I mean, this body for me, that's just me not being used to the build I'm running here. But you're just on spawn, and you deal, like, it's not hard to shoot the chest. It's not hard to get in the head, especially if you shoot on a neck value. The Oden has this start vertical climb that just allows you to like, pop, 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 and just get people fragged. Obviously, there's a personal preference here right now to use the compensator, but also the Colossal Suppressor, I would like to compare that now to the compensator build. So this was the Colossal Suppressor with the longest barrel. So this was the Colossal Suppressor with the longest barrel. But how is it now with the one shorter barrel? So that means we would still have 400 milliseconds ADS time, but not 450. So we'd be going even slower. Colossal Suppressor, second barrel, up into the wall. And it still does feel fantastic. It doesn't feel like all too terrible. You definitely get the vibe. ADS time is a bit slower. Yes, ADS time is a bit slower. So definitely this build here had the most beautiful ADS time. But just from a recoil feeling, we're okay here. We're at least up to kilo value. So this would be like 400 milliseconds ADS time. This is 350 milliseconds ADS time. So that comes down to what can you get used to? What can you fight with? I say that the Oden is a gun that you're going to be using up to 50, 60 meters max. And that's where you kind of usually want to have the quick ADS sounds where you're like, oh, imposter, bam, doof, bam. And that's where you really want to have the 350 milliseconds version. But I think the Colossal Suppressor version is not too far away from that. Now, we talked a lot about the Oden as a VLK gun, which is fantastic. You can play VLK together with an MP5. But what if you actually want to play the Oden with a sniper? Because realistically, we know the Oden does a lot of damage now. Like a lot of damage. Every single bullet. It's like a shotgun. So I thought, I want to play this in close quarter combat. But how could we build this close quarter combat optimal? And then it hit me. We want to obviously play Corp Combat Holo Side. So we're going to slap on the blue dot to build this together with a sniper then. We're going to have the tac laser on for absolute crazy ADS times. The 730 barrel is a must. We don't need the 810, but the 730 is needed. We can't go for the 420 because we still want the bullet velocity that we're actually able to shoot on the 50 meter range. So we snipe and then we have a stable beam on 50 meter range. Now we could go for the compensator, but in this build, we kind of also want to be able to fight inside a building, and therefore we can't actually play the compensator. We can't make ADS time worse. So we have two choices here. We could go for the stipple grip tape, but the stipple grip tape value-wise always loses against stock. So for me, it has turned out to actually use the FTAC XL Elite comp stock, and therefore have an Oden that comes down to a 309 millisecond ADS time. That's still slow compared to an MP5, for example. But obviously, you're pairing this with the snipers, so you're going to be playing this a little bit smarter. You're not going to be tac sprinting a corner to jump around it. No, you're going to be walking. You can still bunny hop, so normal sprint, but not tac sprint, because your sprint to fire time is okay. But your tactical sprint to fire time, let's not talk about that. The Oden in this build is a fantastic close quarter combat versatile gun. Let's watch how the recoil is. Obviously in this build we had to make a lot of sacrifices, recoil control versus ADS times, trying to get somewhere in fast enough. But as you can see, the ADS time is there. So the Oden does a fantastic job on zooming in fast. Still not insane fast, but fast enough. How does it feel now if we're spraying that into a wall? And that's the good thing again about the Oden. The Oden still has the absolute classy straight shooting behavior. It just goes up in a line. You have the wobble to the right here. But if you're trying to control this right now, we're talking about like the 20 meter range. You're good off. You can do it. Mine is not absolutely precise. And we see, yes, there is bounce happening, but we're pretty good together. We just can't get it better at this point. So what we could do is, yes, we could technically slap off the stock and put on a muzzle, but then you're losing ADS time again. So I feel like this is the best trade-off you could find if you really wish to play the Oden in a close quarter combat. Yes, you could also slap off the commando and put on a grip, but honestly, before you slap on the commando and put on a different grip, I'd rather put off the stock and put on a compensator. Just so you see how that one feels then. You're still very good off with the Oden. It feels fantastic. You're kind of losing this one and you get a really nice squash. When you're shooting someone for just like anyways, inside buildings, when you have to phase shotguns and others, still don't forget 66 damage per bullet. And yes, you can just spray on a point there too. And then you get disconnected. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed our trip into the world of the Oden here. And yes, these disconnects from the server happen when you're about to spoil the beans and tell people about the absolute crazy builds you're ready to bring down. So again, you can play this build here, or you slap off the elite comp stock to put on a compensator. This is the close to mid-range Oden that we then also play together with an SPR, normal ammo again, for the lowest bullet drop. Then there's also the hybrid Oden with a good ADS time that you have two choices. You're going to play with the Colossal Suppressor or the Compensator. Just try out what you feel about there, but definitely the 730 inch barrel instead of the 810 inch barrel and the Commander foregrip is the vibe. 20 round mag is a limitation, but that is like just one of the big problems with the Oden. This one I play together with an MP5 for maximum movability. You have the super quick MP5 where you can travel around the map like crazy. And if you're not inside a building, you whip out the Oden, and with a good ADS time, you can ego challenge everyone. You actually zoom in faster than the standard VLK builds on the others. And you have just the absolute insane damage to put down and lay waste to your opponents. This was another explained series that I really enjoyed doing because the Oden is one of my favorite guns. Definitely drop in the description your Oden builds and how you have built the Oden. Maybe you have a way smarter idea than me and you came up with something that's fantastic. Obviously, multiplayer Oden looks completely different. I do play no scope, and technically, yes, you can play the Oden no scope, but I kind of feel like because if you pair something together with a sniper, the blue dot is just so perfect to follow up on hitting that snipe, or just in general to be able to exactly cover this mid-range where you don't want to snipe, but you kind of want to beam. Thanks for watching this video. Hopefully I could bring the Oden close to you and make you enjoy it in the Warzone. Give it a try it out. And yes, we have suppressor builds this time for the people that really are in the church of the monolithic and can't let go, can't get the very benefits from the compensator. If you still struggle, just watch the video on Monolithic versus Muzzle Break versus Compensator. Thanks for supporting so much. Thanks for helping my family out to make a living. Love y'all, and see you soon in the Warzone.